Hi, this is Lucas Pylypczak, again for MMI 503, Project 3. This is part 2 for my part 2 of the project where I'm going to go through my Leslie simulator that I made. And I'll start off by kind of walking through my block diagram and showing you how those link up with the parameters here. And then we'll do some demos that I'll talk over later on in the video, showing you some musical aspects, changing just a rotation here, and then just some kind of extreme physics aspects by changing some of these parameters, and then changing these so you can hear how those change the color of the sound. So to start off, here's a block diagram I made of how I went about creating this Leslie effect. The first portion is a Linkwitz-Riley crossover here, so that you have the low frequencies going to the drum and the high frequencies going to the horn. Next was creating that Doppler effect that happens from in a Leslie from the horn rotating and the velocity of the sound waves changing as that horn spins around. That is controlled here with a modulated delay line, and the sinusoidal wave that controls it right here is R omega sine omega, and the R that is in that equation is the radius of the horn, or here what I have is horn length and drum size. So you can set that here, and then you can see with this omega out here that as the frequency increases, the depth of that modulation, or the depth of those Doppler shifts, increases as well. So not only does the length of the horn change that, but also the frequency at which the horn is spinning. Next, in the signal kind of chain, you have a split where half of the, or where the signal goes to an IR morphing convolver, which is really kind of cool idea that I had for this, was to use 4 impulse responses for the kind of 4 positions of the horn, being front, back, left, and right, and then morphing between those as that horn spins around. So you're constantly morphing, let's say, between right and back, then back to left, then left to front, then front to right again, dependent on where you are in that rotation. And it's cool because you generate that spinning and panning sound without actually doing any panning using a panning module, just using filtering with some impulse responses. Now, that is controlled by cosine omega here, which is the equation if you think the x position of the horn at any time. Then I have a spreader here in the chain so that you can control exactly how wide or how stereo the effect is. Bringing it into the middle will make it mono, but you'll still get the pulsing sound as you switch between them. Now, the other part of this is just the modulated delay signal going through a panner, which is kind of the generic way of doing it, which you have control of depth, width, and the rate is again tied to this cosine omega. Then a tremolo, which I use just in case you want to really pull down the width of the panner, but still have that kind of flutter effect that happens with a Leslie. So I allow you to choose the depth of the tremolo as well. So you can set this line here as being more centered and using tremolo, and then have the convolved signal be kind of spread wider, and it makes a pretty cool sounding effect. The same thing is happening on the drum side, and the last part that we have is this line being the dry signal going through a panner and tremolo, just in case you want to include back some more of the dry signal. Now that has its own separate output here, and these two have a mix control. The only difference then is on the horn mix, you have a high shelving filter where you can choose how much gain to add on the high end, because some of it is lost through the impulse responses that I used, and just from the panning itself seems to really cut it down. So that kind of sums up the entire block diagram. You can see where those link up. Here we have the drum pan IR mix and the horn pan IR mix. I went through the size here, the width for both the regular panning and the IR panning, the dry width here, and then separate dry control here. your high shelving gain is here, and your tremolo for panning and dry mixes are here. The other control here is what I call reflections. That's the feedback back into the modulated delay line. I call it reflections because you can think of it as, I guess, like multiple Doppler shifted sound waves that are bouncing off the cabinet itself. So I kind of simulate those by adding some feedback, and it actually sounds pretty good depending on the sound that you use. The other controls that you have are the horn acceleration and deceleration and the drum acceleration and deceleration, and that controls how long it takes to, let's say, go from slower break up to fast, so to increase in your speed, and then deceleration being how long it takes to go from a faster speed to a slower speed. I gave you complete control over all four of those because in a physical Leslie, the horn and drum would not accelerate at the same rate, and also they would take longer to accelerate than they do to decelerate. So in order to simulate that better, I gave you kind of separate control of all of those. The crossover of that original filter is here, and then your control to switch between the modes of rotation are here, slow, fast, and break being no spinning. And this just, wherever your kind of signal ends up, it's just going to stay there. So there's no rotation anymore. Essentially, omega goes down to 0 there. Now that kind of wraps it up for the kind of talk through. Now I'll go through and do some audio examples for you to hear, and I'll talk over those as well. So this is how it sounds going slow at first, and then I'll be pulling it up to fast and playing around with it as the song goes on. Now here is the clean bypassed version of the audio. So that's a nice example of how it really changes the sound of the organ and gives it a pretty cool effect. The next example that I have is just another organ and another song, kind of give you a different taste of how it can be used. So this is what the original sounds like. So for the last part, what I wanted to do was play a clip and manipulate the parameters as the clip played so that you can hear how those affect the overall sound as I change those. So I'm going to go ahead and just start the clip, and then I'll talk through as I do all the changes. So this is just the convolved signal with no width. So spread that out, that's how it sounds. And this is just the pan signal. No width, full width. Now the tremolo going all the way up. Now going back with the IR, it sounds much better that way. Increasing the reflections. You get a whooshing sound in the bass and kind of moving like resonant filters up top. Increasing the length. So those are those parameters. I'll go ahead and switch to all drum so that you can hear that. Obviously there's not a lot of sound down here right now. If I change the crossover, you can hear more. So that's with the tremolo up higher, bringing down the dry width or cutting out the dry completely. That's what we're at. So that's about it. I've kind of gone through all the settings there. Hope you enjoyed the video, and let me know if you have any questions.